Military Construction and Veterans Affairs and Related Agencies Subcommittee to order. Good afternoon. Today, we will be holding an oversight budget hearing for the Installations, Environment, Energy, and BRAC segment of our budget. We welcome back the Honorable Robert B. McMahon, Assistant Secretary of Defense for Sustainment, and our top 4 service installation chiefs. Lieutenant General Gwen Bingham, Assistant Chief of Staff for Installation Management, U.S. Army. Vice Admiral Dixon R. Smith, Deputy Chief of Naval Operations, Fleet Readiness, and Logistics. And Admiral Smith, we congratulate you, Admiral Smith, we congratulate you on your many years of service to our country and know this is the last time that you'll be joining us as you retire after 41 years of service in our military. So thank you very much. Major General Vincent A. Coglianese, Commander, Marine Corps Installations Command, and Assistant Deputy Commandant, Installations and Logistics. And this will also be General Coglianese's last time testifying in front of the committee, as he will be retiring after 36 years of service. Clearly a slacker. And since the court reporter results have no context, I was kidding. Just to make sure that's understood. Brigadier General John Allen Jr., Air Force Director of Civil Engineers, Deputy Chief of Staff for Logistics, Engineering, and Force Protection, has joined us as well. We certainly have a lot to discuss this afternoon. The budget request supports our men and women in the military, supports readiness, and works toward addressing much-needed military construction needs of older facilities. The FY 2020 budget request for military construction and family housing is $11.4 billion, an increase of $910 million above the FY 2019 enacted level. Unfortunately, the request also includes $7.2 billion for construction of a wasteful border wall in Oco. $3.6 billion would be for a new installment of the wall, and $3.6 billion to backfill the projects whose money was stolen to fund this boondoggle. Let me be clear. I do not intend to use MilCon dollars to fund this wall. And if the administration follows through and steals money from previously approved projects, the chairwoman's mark will not provide funding for backfill. I am not joking. It is troubling that the administration would want to use the military construction program to construct a wall when the program has ranged from only 1% to 4.6% of the total Department of Defense budget since 1990. Military construction supports service members and their families. The idea that construction of a border wall takes precedence for this administration over our service members' safety and readiness is unconscionable. Additionally, military construction funding should be used to correct other vulnerabilities, like coastal and riverline flooding, drought, wildfires, and thawing permafrost, all of which are pervasive problems. There are bases that experience massive coastal flooding that regularly flood runways today, just by example. Over time, gradual sea level changes magnify the impacts of storm surge and may eventually result in permanent inundation of property. What is most outrageous about this unconscionable raid on our military readiness and national security is that the Department of Defense has consistently reported that 32% of facilities are in fair or poor condition, yet the President thinks it's okay to divert these badly needed funds for an unnecessary wall for a non-existent emergency that was rejected in a bipartisan, bicameral vote, not once, but twice. We need to ensure that all life, health, and safety issues are addressed and that we are not frivolously spending military construction funds on unnecessary and non-requested projects. With that said, the FY 2020 budget request does include some beneficial items. The budget includes $211 million for critical health and safety repairs for family housing across all installations. And while it is critical to make sure the families of our service members are safe and adequately provided for, especially during deployments, I do want to know and plan to ask why the private companies aren't picking up these costs, because that was the deal. We provide the tenants and guarantee funding, and they provide the upkeep and repairs. This is a major red flag that flies in the face of the privatization decision that was made many years ago. The budget request also includes necessary funding for schools and hospitals. The FY 2020 budget request includes $552.4 million for reserve component construction, which is $87 million, or 15.7% above the FY 2019 enacted level. As you can see, colleagues, we have many important issues to discuss. I believe this hearing is a great opportunity to identify those crucial areas where we can do more to serve those who serve us. And now I'm pleased to recognize Judge Carter, the ranking member, for his opening remarks.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate being recognized and welcome each and every one of you. We're glad you're here. Looking forward to hearing from you. We're going to discuss military construction, family housing, base realignment and closure, overseas contingency operations, hurricane relief, emergency funding requests for fiscal year 2020. We all recognize that the current and previous administration and Congress has put off investments in infrastructure in order to deal with immediate needs of warfighting. We also all recognize we can no longer do that. I'm pleased to see the budget request for the overall increase for military construction. I'm also pleased with the service's various efforts to rectify past problems and set a better course for the future. However, it is an unusual budget request. In part, this is because it includes $2 billion in disaster relief related to last year's hurricane. Everyone who visited the Florida Panhandle says Tyndall Air Force Base was all but destroyed. The damage at Camp Lejeune is extensive. I fear the damage and the slow pace of addressing it is affecting readiness. I also fear it's affecting morale. Congress should have acted long before now. I hope we pass a supplemental soon and that the committee approves the pending $600 million reprogramming request to address immediate needs. Regarding the $9.2 billion request for unspecified border security projects, I know we have a security and humanitarian crisis on the border. 50,000 people crossed in January, 75,000 people crossed in February, 75,000 plus is estimated across this month, and the releases have been, everything is full, and thousands are being released every day. Specifically, I've said that I support the President's declaration of national emergency as long as it doesn't affect my soldiers at Fort Hood. I have looked into that, and while that is yet to be seen, it's my hope the subcommittee will continue to work in our traditional bipartisan and mission-focused manner to support our men and women in uniform, and they need us to do this. As I prepare to close, congratulations to each of your coming retirement. I hope our paths cross in Texas and that you will join me in attending the ribbon-cutting ceremony for the new barracks we're going to build at Fort Hood. Admiral Smith, I understand you are close to retirement as well, and that's great. I tell you what, you guys are going to get out there and make all that money now that you've gotten through with this job. Looking forward to seeing that. And Major General, you also, I hope it's not because of this committee y'all have all decided to leave, but we'll try to be as nice to you as we can today. I'd like to thank each and every one of you on this panel for keeping your eye on our soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines. Even though new fighter planes and weapon systems are critical to enhancing the lethality of our armed forces and reducing casualties, we cannot successfully fight wars or defend the peace without our men and women in uniform and the support of their families. As I review the budget request and make funding decisions with my subcommittee colleagues, I pledge to always have them at the front of our minds. I encourage my colleagues to do the same. With that, I yield back.
Thank you, Judge Carter. Secretary.
One more thing, I am going to have to leave. We're double booking right now, and there's a Defense Committee hearing that I've got to go attend briefly. Mr. Rutherford will take my place so I can attend that for a while.
That's impossible, Judge.
Oh, yeah, no, it's not. But thank you all for being here.
Thank you, Judge Carter. Secretary McMahon.
Congressman Ryan, before I begin, I'd like a point of order if I could. We've mentioned 2 of the 4 with me today are about to retire. It's actually 3 of 4. This will be Lieutenant General Bingham's last year, and she retires in June as well. And so tremendous folks who have dedicated their life to supporting this nation, and I wanted to acknowledge that before I begin. Congressman Ryan, Judge Carter, distinguished members of the subcommittee, on behalf of myself and my service colleagues, thank you for the opportunity to present the President's fiscal year 2020 budget request for the Department's sustainment programs. My written statement has been submitted for the record. As the Assistant Secretary for Sustainment, I focus on supporting the National Defense Strategy through 3 strategic objectives: creating and sustaining resilient installations, ensuring safe places for our members and families to live, work, play, and pray, and enhancing material availability of Department of Defense weapon systems. Our fiscal year 2020 request continues the Department's efforts in achieving these objectives and rebuilding our military into a more capable, lethal, and ready joint force. Our installations are our power projection platforms, and investments in infrastructure, environment, and energy ensure they are ready to support the defense of our nation. We are requesting $21 billion for the military construction and family housing appropriations to construct or acquire facilities needed to bed down new mission capabilities, restore and modernize enduring infrastructure, eliminate those that are excess or obsolete, and begin hurricane recovery. Aside from MILCON, we are requesting $10.4 billion for sustainment and almost $5 billion for restoration and modernization, a 7% and 80% increase over fiscal year 2019, respectively. While this is a significant improvement, we continue to take risk in these areas. And because we must adapt to a variety of threats and increase installation resilience, we will continue to focus on robust infrastructure, sound land management, increased energy resilience, improving cybersecurity, and the effects of a changing climate. We are also committed to protecting the quality of life for our personnel and their families. Our primary focus here is ensuring access to safe, high-quality, affordable family and unaccompanied housing. To that end, our budget includes $1.3 billion to support our worldwide non-privatized family housing inventory, which includes more than 34,000 government-owned and 7,100 leased units. This increase also demonstrates our continued commitment to modernizing unaccompanied personnel housing, with more than $674 million requested for construction and renovation projects supporting more than 3,900 trainees and permanent party personnel. With regards to housing privatization, it was the right thing to do, improving the quality of on-base housing and providing the necessary long-term investment our personnel deserve. That said, recent media coverage reveals deficiencies that we must and will address. The Department is committed to working with our housing privatization partners and you to provide the best housing possible. Last month, I testified before the subcommittee on the potential support the Department of Defense may provide in the construction of a border barrier. This request includes $9.2 billion of emergency funding to restore resources that may be reallocated in fiscal year 2019 should the Acting Secretary of Defense choose to exercise 10 U.S.C. 2808 authority, and for the unspecified fiscal year 2020 military construction to build border barriers. Additionally, this amount includes funding to rebuild facilities damaged by Hurricanes Florence and Michael. Our fiscal year 2020 budget also requests $3.6 billion for environmental programs, a $188 million increase over last year's request. This includes $254 million in the BRAC environmental account, focusing on restoration, compliance, and adopting new technologies to reduce cost and accelerating cleanup. Finally, energy is an essential enabler of our military capability. To that end, we are requesting $150 million for the Energy Resilience and Conservation Investment Program to fund projects that improve resilience and security, save energy and water, reduce costs, and most importantly, contribute to our mission readiness. We appreciate Congress's and this subcommittee's continued support as we work together to provide the best support possible to our soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines and their families. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. We're now going to begin questions. We're going to do the 5-minute rounds, alternating sides, recognizing members in order of seniority as they were seated at the beginning of the hearing. Gentleman from Hawaii.
Thank you. Mr. Secretary, you heard the chair pretty clearly there. I think the remark that she gave was that she wasn't kidding, that her chair's mark will not include any of the prior appropriated amounts which are now identified for diversion to the border wall. Those include $9 billion or so, as I recall, of projects, including $452 million in Hawaii, dating back 4 fiscal years, all prioritized by this Congress and this Defense Department and this President. And obviously we disagree with that. And so my question is, since you are all in the military and the military does contingency planning as well as anybody, what's your contingency plan if these projects are not funded by this Congress as a result of our disagreement with the utilization of prior appropriated monies for purposes not appropriated? And if, as is the case with me, and I certainly agree with our chair, it's not that I don't want those projects funded in my district or any other district, but the precedent is a dangerous precedent for Congress. And so if we say no to that, what is your precedent for those $9 billion worth of projects that are basically not going to get funded and not going to proceed?
Congressman, as you know, and as I alluded to last month when I was here, there's a process by which we're going through. And there's a sequence of dollars being utilized to be able to support this national emergency that the President has declared. Dollars that were appropriated by the Congress for the Department of Homeland Security are the first to be used. Secondly, the dollars that will be utilized through the Treasury recoupment will be the second source. Third source will be reprogramming of dollars in support of Section 284. And if there are requirements, and that process still has not been identified where we are today, then we would look to use the authorities of 2808 and determine how much of that would be necessary and what dollars from that would be required and what projects would be deferred as opposed to being canceled, because no projects will be canceled.
At this date, those projects are not reappropriated. So my question is, what is your contingency plan? You must have discussed within the Department of Defense what you will do if Congress actually does not reappropriate monies for projects that were diverted funding-wise to build the border. So you've got a whole range of high priority projects that are stacked up, ready to go, and they've been appropriated, they've been prioritized. All they're waiting for is an award or the right timing. What's the contingency plan? For example, I'll give you a perfect example. A water line that serves 92,000 people, Pearl Harbor and Hickam Base, broke. This is a water line, $78 million project. Water line, appropriated money to replace that water line, broke 36 hours after the last hearing we had. So there could not have been a better illustration of the problems that would arise if that money was appropriated. This water line is about to be awarded. That water line is also on your hit list now. So the question that I've got is, if you take that money to go and give it to the border, which we disagree with, and that water line is still at risk, it's got a patch job on it right now. But if it breaks again, there's no money right now to fix it. So what's the plan?
Congressman, our intent is to continue to follow the process that we defined, and I defined for you earlier in my last visit. Each of the services will go through the process of unawarded projects and determine what the priorities are and the contingencies that we spelled out in terms of what those priorities were and are today. The one priority that I would add is that no project that we intend to award in 2019 will be included in those considered for deferral. And if, in fact, the Congress does not appropriate additional funds, if in fact we need to use those dollars, which is still speculative at this point because we don't know if any of those projects will be approved for utilization under 2808, but if they were, then we would have to determine by service, by project, what deferrals may have to take a longer period of time in addition to what we would present in 2020.
Okay, and let me ask you about that point that you made about projects that you intend to award in 2019. Because it's not at all clear from the information provided from the DOD. Because on the one hand, you have a list of a number of projects which have not yet been awarded, and those include 4 fiscal years' worth of projects that could, in fact, be awarded in 2019. The Pearl Harbor line is a perfect example of that. It's not too far away from being awarded, yet it's on your list. So where do you have a list of projects that you do intend to be awarded in 2019 that would essentially be taken off your list?
Senator, or Congressman, first of all, as I indicated, at this point, it's speculation because we don't know if we'll have to require any of those authorities. The further we move down the fiscal year, the more change that list may see because of different situations, whether there was an issue in terms of planning it, issues with attempting to award and then finding out that someone challenged that award. So the short answer is that that list will evolve over time, that we would look at the further we move down the fiscal year. So today, I am confident that the services have each looked at their list, know what they might have to utilize, but at this point, I can tell you that there is no list that says this is where we're going to go, because at this point in time, there is no requirement.
Thank you.
Mr. Rutherford.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First, let me thank the panel for your tremendous service to this country over these past many years, particularly those of you that are about to leave us. God bless you and thank you. Vice Admiral Smith, the Force Readiness Center is currently undertaking an infrastructure optimization plan to review the workload requirements, assess facility needs, and update investment strategies for our Navy's depots. The baseline assessment, which was completed in December, found that 65% of the depot facilities are rated as poor and or failing. I represent Fleet Readiness Center Southeast, and I've toured their facilities several times. And I can tell you firsthand, as I'm sure you're aware, that they have reached workload capacity in really incredibly aging facilities, and I'm sure that this is having a real impact on readiness. Now, I was glad to see the Navy request the targeting and surveillance systems product support facility. That's going to be huge for the F-35s and P-8s that are there. That's in the 2020 request. However, when you look at the plan overview, I see there's a projected $1.5 billion MILCON requirement through 2026 for Tier 1 through Tier 3 requirements. Now, my question is about depots, because I see no MILCON projects for depots were programmed for 2021. Do you believe we're prioritizing our depots infrastructure properly?
Thank you, sir. As you alluded to, we're doing that study right now. That's back being reviewed. In the past, no, sir, we have not targeted our infrastructure in those repair facilities, whether you talk the shipyard or the fleet readiness centers. That should be done within the next month or two. We will be done with that review to release it. And that will inform the POM 21 budget that we're building right now as to what needs to be sequenced and programmed in that has the greatest effectiveness soonest to improve the efficiency of those. As you well know, there are phenomenal artisans that work in those facilities. They're working under suboptimal conditions right now, and so that infrastructure optimization plan will help inform what we need to put in when and build out that MILCON pipeline to improve the readiness as soon as we can.
So there's no programs already in the RAC that need?
There are programs in the RAC, but we also want to make sure we're investing in the right things, and that's what the study will do for us, is make sure that we've got the right prioritization. So we don't want to award a project that may be sub-optimizing the overall plan that we have. And so, as you know, we've been putting on our restoration modernization side a fair amount of money in all the FRCs over the past 6 years. JAX has been one of those beneficiaries,
right.
But not the money we need to, but we want to make sure we've got the plan right before we actually start putting more money into it.
Okay. Assistant Secretary, we saw reports last night that the Office of Secretary of Defense is planning to ask Congress for $9 billion in disaster supplemental funding. Do you know when that's actually going to make its way to us? And could you talk a little bit about what a delay in that supplemental funding could potentially do to readiness? Because it's got to be huge.
Congressman, despite the reports that we may have heard, I am not aware that the department has come to the Congress and requested a supplemental. Clearly, if the Congress were to work and to provide a supplemental, the department would be very appreciative. I think there are.
If I could interrupt,
yes, sir.
Secretary, what I was asking was, do you know when it will make its way over here?
I am not aware that there's an official position today that the department is going to request, and I would defer that to our comptroller.
Okay. And can you talk about a little bit about Tyndall is the impact that a delay of that is going to have on Tyndall?
What I would tell you, Congressman, is that both the Air Force and the Marines today are cash flowing a variety of requirements that they have, whether it is for Lejeune or whether it's for Tyndall. The reprogramming request that the department has come forward with will help that process. I know that both of the services are working hard to define what the exact requirements are. Obviously, the Marines are ahead of the Air Force at this point in time, only because it occurred earlier. But there is a desire to be able to clearly identify what those requirements are and be able to articulate it to the Congress.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. I just experienced the quickest 5 minutes of my life. Thank you.
Thank you. I have a couple questions here. One of the items that caught the committee's attention over the past few days was General Neller's memo that became public. And just to read this is stunning, calling the two internal memos that said the quote-unquote unplanned, unbudgeted deployment along the border had forced him to cancel or reduce planned military training in multiple countries and to delay urgent repairs at bases and have posed an unacceptable risk to Marine Corps combat readiness and solvency. I'm sure you've seen this. And had forced him to cancel or reduce planned military training in at least 5 countries and delay urgent repairs at bases. I would like to ask any of the panelists to comment on that from some of the other services, if any of you agree with General Neller's assessment as it relates to your service. A readiness issue, training canceled. General, I know.
So I'll stay in my lane, Congressman, with the facilities and installation. So the storm hit the Marine Corps, devastated the Marine Corps, punched to the gut 6 months ago. This is FY18. We cash flowed that money within our sustainment. Since then, we've moved $400 million from around the Marine Corps. So the storm, although has no doubt seriously impacted Cherry Point, Camp Lejeune, and New River significantly, both families and facilities, but has now impacted the whole Marine Corps because by pulling that money from the other sustainment portfolios from the West Coast and the Pacific, we're pretty much out of cash for facility sustainment. So that in itself, and the totalitarian look of it, added up, is probably in Marine Corps our biggest bill right now.
Anyone else want to comment on this?
Sure. I'll comment for the Air Force. So as Secretary McMahon suggested, we've been cash flowing the recovery at Tyndall since the hurricane hit. And for us, that means about $550 million in O&M accounts in fiscal year 19. That was unprogrammed, unbudgeted, that we've had to cash flow. We think there's another $200 million of requirement that needs to be obligated here this fiscal year, which would take that total of $750. And then equally important, we need about $150 million in MILCON planning and design, which will set the conditions that we can be successful when we start to build out the permanent recovery there at Tyndall.
So is the move to the southern border reducing military training? And then with regard, is that what you're talking about?
No, I'm talking about the money that we're using to recover the missions at Tyndall. So we have brought missions back to Tyndall, and we've used O&M to make sure that the conditions are safe for them to operate back at Tyndall.
Mr. Secretary, you have a comment on this? Because this seems to me to be absolutely stunning that coming out of two wars, coming out of sequestration, understanding the threat from Russia, from China, around the world, that we now have military training exercises that were planned that won't happen in 5 countries, and repairs to bases, and we know some of the facilities that some of our men and women are having to live in and their families. This is stunning to me, that this emergency, as I said last time you were here, that the president didn't declare for 2 years when the House was Republican and the Senate was Republican. Now it's a political issue. Now that money's coming out of very important training exercises where the Commandant of the Marines is saying it is unacceptable to risk Marine Corps combat readiness and solvency. What is the defense for this?
Congressman, what I would tell you for the 5 of us that are before you today, I'm not sure that we're qualified other than to provide an opinion on whether or not the readiness is impacted from an operational capability. What I would offer is whether it's the Commandant, the CNO, or the service chiefs, or their operations directors would be best qualified to comment on that.
Well, they have. That's what I just read. And that was 2 memos, one in January and one in March, I guess. No, February and March, February 19, March 18. That's exactly what the Commandant of the Marines said.
And I would not question the Commandant has a much better idea of the readiness of his troops than do I.
I would think so. Ms. Pingree? Oh, sorry. Ms. Roby?
Thank you. Good afternoon. Thank you all for being here with us. I only have one question for you this afternoon. It relates to the U.S. Army Aviation Center for Excellence. As I'm sure you are aware, Fort Rucker and the Army Aviation Center for Excellence falls within the district that I represent in Southeast Alabama. Just some rough by the numbers, Fort Rucker has roughly 5,000 military personnel assigned, 3,500 civilian employees, and 5,300 contractors. Rucker has approximately 600 aircraft that makes up roughly 25% of all Army aviation yearly flight hours. There's 5 Army base fields, 15 training sites, 67 remote sites, and a refueling point. The Center of Excellence is there to train, educate, develop Army pilots, manage the aviation enterprise, and integrate indispensable aviation capabilities and requirements across the warfighting functions. The Center for Excellence commander, though, also oversees geographically dispersed training at Fort Eustis and Fort Huachuca that includes unmanned aerial systems training and maintenance training. Some of this geographically dispersed training operations still do not have permanent buildings to work out of and oftentimes do work from trailers. So, Mr. Secretary and General Bingham, has any thought been given, I'm just throwing this out there, has any thought been given, or would it even be possible to relocate geographically dispersed training back to Fort Rucker to save money and gain efficiency? This was a partial effort back during the 2005 BRAC when looking at the benefit to the Army to co-locate the Army Aviation Logistics School with the Aviation Center at Fort Rucker. And I will stop and listen.
Good afternoon, Congresswoman Roby. I appreciate the question, and I hail from Troy, Alabama, so Fort Rucker is very near and dear to me. I will tell you in this budget, we do have the training support facility as part of one of our MILCON projects there. In respect to your direct question, though, I will have to take that one back for the record to really properly give you an answer on that one. So I'll be happy to do that.
Congresswoman, I also have an interest in your district as my wife came from Dothan, so we track it as well. And we're moving back to Lake Martin here at some point in time, so we'll become one of your part of the family. I will defer to the Army in terms of specifically how they would manage that and whether or not it made operational sense for them to co-locate from where they are today.
I appreciate that very much. This is the most well-represented Alabama panel I've ever addressed, so you're welcome to Montgomery anytime as well. But I do appreciate that, and again, I'm just asking the question in light of today's hearing, and would love to hear any information that you gather and can respond to soon. So thank you very much. Thank you all for your service to our country and that of your families as well. I appreciate it, and I yield back.
Thank you. Ms. Bustos.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will also thank you. I don't know if Judge Carter's still here, but anyway, thanks to the other side also. Secretary McMahon and General Allen, I represent city of Peoria, Illinois, and there's an Air National Guard base there. I'm very proud of that. And in the FY19 budget, the Peoria Air National Guard was awarded $9 million for a new fire station. And I've been to this firehouse and witnessed firsthand how the current setup, it just doesn't work. I mean, there's a reason why they put this request in and why this has been approved. Wondering if this project could lose its funding under the President's emergency declaration. That would be question number one.
Thank you, ma'am. So from the rule set that we've heard from the Office of the Secretary of Defense, they will not seek to take funding or defer projects that are planned to award this fiscal year, and I show that project planning to award in September. So right now, I'm not showing that it would be a project that we would look at for deferral based on the rules.
That is very good news. That is very good news. Thank you so much. So I am going to shift gears then. I also, Rock Island County is where I live, and you're probably familiar with the Rock Island Arsenal. Literally an island in the middle of the Mississippi River between Illinois and Iowa. So the Rock Island Arsenal, it houses 1st Army, Army Sustainment Command, Joint Munitions Command, Joint Manufacturing and Technology Center, and it also includes the Army's only foundry. It's one of 6 Army contracting command centers. So as you might imagine, some of the buildings on this island are very, very old and outdated. It is, the arsenal has provided munitions going back to the Civil War, so there's a lot of history there. Some lack sprinklers, some lack fire escapes, others are not ADA compliant and don't have basic design features like wheelchair accessible egresses. And I'm wondering, Secretary McMahon and Lieutenant General Bingham, if you could address how projects like these are prioritized. If you could maybe walk me through that in the 2.5 minutes that we have left.
Thank you, Chair. What you have talked about in terms of improving our facilities there on the arsenal, most likely we would use restoration and modernization dollars. Our MCOM Installation Management Commander is the one who prioritizes those dollars looking across the Army landscape. And so we've done a great job across the Army infrastructure to be able to improve the condition, making it from whether it's in poor and failing condition or trying to sustain it in good and adequate condition. And so we use a prioritization process, and that's what I would most likely tell you we would use there on the arsenal.
Okay, very good. Secretary McMahon, anything to add to that?
Congressman, all that I would add for both projects, as General Allen indicated, one is in front of that cut line of occurring in 2019. The others may or may not. But the reality is, as we have promised, no projects will be canceled. There'll be perhaps some deferral. And so with the restoration, modernization funding that we have, plus the MILCON, the intent is to keep the promises of what we have made previously to be able to support those MILCON projects.
Okay, very good. Thank you so much. And again, thanks to all of you for your service, and congratulations on your pending retirements. With that, I yield back, Mr. Chairman, or Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Ms. Bustos. Who's next? Okay. Ms. Pingree?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, all of you, for being here, and thank you for your service, those of you who are retiring. We're honored that you're with us today. Well, just quickly to follow up on this perpetual question here, and I know it can be easy for you guys to talk about projects that we want to have happen in our districts, and you have to explain why they may not happen. But Secretary McMahon, you were here on February 27th. You gave me a really articulate answer about, I asked you if you would use your office to make sure that the selection of projects was not influenced by politics, and I know we have a list out here, and you gave me a very articulate and strong answer. Then all of us read on March 13th when Senator McSally from Arizona said, I have spoken to the acting Secretary of Defense, the President, and the Vice President to underscore that we must ensure military readiness while also funding border security. As a result, no Arizona military construction projects will be impacted. So that probably got all of us concerned. How come Arizona, but we're still on the list in Maine? Can you ensure that there is not a political decision going on here?
Congresswoman, the answer that I gave you that I was emphatic on, I still believe. I've talked with my counterparts. They have done what I believe to be a yeoman's job of identifying what are unawarded projects today. I have no indication that anyone is not following the guidance that's been put out in terms of authorities, plus adding the additional authority that General Allen just alluded to, and the fact that anything that we intended to award in fiscal year 2019 would not be included on the list. I have seen nothing at this point in time that would suggest anything that what I told you was not true. I was not part of the conversation between the senator and the acting secretary, so I don't know what alluded to that. But as I look, the two on either side of me in the eye, I know what it is that they're doing and the approach that they're taking.
Okay, well, I will hope that that holds true, because we're certainly concerned about the projects in our state, and I reiterate what everyone else has said. I have 3 minutes, and I'm going to see if I can really rush through this other question. It's about PFAS contamination. Last week, the press reported that the finalization of a drinking water standard on chemical toxins has been delayed, the chemical toxins known as PFAS, because the Defense Department is insisting on a weaker standard of 400 parts per trillion to trigger the cleanup. That's almost 6 times higher than the EPA's 70 parts per trillion drinking water advisory level. So just fast forward, when asked, Jean Shaheen asked the question at a March 14th hearing, and Acting Secretary Shanahan did not respond on the substance, but assured her that he was accountable and responsible for the safety and security of our men. So it's been 12 days. Can you confirm that the DOD is seeking a weaker standard than the EPA on PFAS?
Congressman, what I'll tell you is that the Department of Defense sees the issue of PFAS, PFOA as a national issue, not just a DOD issue. What I will tell you, and I'll be explicit on this, is that the DOD is not seeking an alternate value. What we are attempting to do, and what we've communicated, irrespective of what I've read, is that we want to follow standard processes that are based in statute and EPA regulation to be able to clearly articulate what those levels ought to be.
So if you're seeking a national standard and the current EPA is 70 parts per trillion, I hope that doesn't mean that somehow the administration is trying to change the EPA standard to 400 parts per trillion, or conversely, I hope we're not thinking of having our military families have to live in an environment that has a weaker standard.
Congresswoman, I'd be delighted to bring my experts over and walk you through what the math looks like. What I would describe to you very simply, though, up front, is that 70 parts per trillion is a composite number that represents well beyond water. It's the exposure that any individual might have from a variety of things, from tanning of shoes to the cookware that you have, and it's a cumulative number. The discussion is that as you articulate that number through the process that is followed in statute and in the EPA guidance, that if you look specifically as groundwater, that would be a different number. And I'd be delighted to bring our experts over to walk you through that.
Great. Well, I will run out of time, so I'd be happy to take you up on that. But I do have concerns if and again, I'm not dealing with any data or understanding of exactly what you're suggesting. But the fact is, when you're dealing with physical toxicity of individuals, you have to look at some of the cumulative impact, particularly with something like PFAS, which are very common in our environment. So I would hate to think that you would adopt a different standard using a technicality. I understand what you're saying, that may not be in water, but we know in particular a lot of military bases have a lot of PFAS contamination, and individuals in our, in our culture are exposed to a lot of them as well.
Congresswoman, we absolutely understand, and I believe that the department, well before I rejoined the department, has been aggressive in their response. Where we know that we have been the source of that contamination, we've responded. Where the drinking water has been above the 70 parts per trillion, we've reacted and done what was appropriate to ensure that everyone had safe drinking water. And today we're at a position where we have been the source of that contamination. There are no installations or communities-run installations where we were the source that are above that level, and we continue to follow the circular process, again, in law, of how we ought to go mitigate once we get to that point.
Thank you. I'll follow up with you, and I've used up my time. I'll yield back. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Pingreen. Mr. Cartwright?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Secretary McMahon, nice to have you back. I appreciated your comments about the recent media coverage concerning the privatized military family housing and the deficiencies that were unearthed and that you have undertaken to address. I'm going to ask you to bear with me on this rather long question. This month, top commanders in the service branches embraced the idea of a set of tenants' rights for residents of on-base privatized military housing. And I want to ask you about some additional principles that may run a little deeper than the most basic general plans. I realize it's going to take time to craft and issue final departmental policies, but I'm going to go through 6 principles, and I want to see if they sound good to you just off the top. Principle 1, privatized military housing residents deserve active outreach present in some form in all residential buildings on how to file a complaint or make a maintenance request. And online systems are usually the best systems to utilize for this purpose because of their universal, ever-present access. Principle 2, thoroughness and accountability demand a record-keeping and a reporting system of housing complaints and maintenance requests that is reviewable by local commanders, department commanders, and even committees of Congress on request. Principle 3, the idea already proposed by top service branch commanders of a housing advocate for residents in privatized military housing is a good one, but to be effective, that advocate should be a separate, dedicated entity or office that is assigned the unique and unconflicted task of supporting tenant safety and health-related requests and ensuring that remediation of safety and health risks actually takes place. Principle 4, response and remediation efforts to safety and health threats in military housing managed by private sector property companies should be executed only by professionals knowledgeable about, professionally trained and rated for, experienced in, and capable of performing the proper response for the safety and health threat present. The competency of repair personnel and contractors should be constantly reviewed by service branch personnel assigned and trained to do exactly that. Principle 5, military personnel and family members are by their very nature temporary tenants of base housing. They are often not in a particular housing unit or a building long enough to wage and win a lengthy administrative battle with a negligent or incompetent landlord. And that landlord's red tape or obfuscation, rather than relying on the temporary tenants for much of the overall oversight of the safety and health aspects of privatized base housing, the service branches must fully shoulder this responsibility themselves as the only reliable long-term stewards of living standards in privatized base quarters. And finally, Principle 6, better to judge the job being done by private sector property management companies. The landlords should report each year by year both A, the federal taxpayer-paid revenues collected by the property management company, and B, the expenditures made by the property management company on property maintenance, repairs, replacements, and upgrades. And that report should be reviewable by department commanders, DOD leadership, and committees of Congress upon request. Mr. Secretary, that was a mouthful. Do you like the way those sound? Do you agree with them?
Congressman, thank you for, first of all, your interest in this. As I mentioned in my opening statement, one of the most important responsibilities I have is to ensure that our military members and their families have a safe place to live, work, play, and pray. And I take that very, very seriously. What I would offer, having written those down, and would be happy to discuss in greater detail, your tenets 1, 2, 3, and 5, I adamantly agree with and strongly encourage that we do that. Number 6, I agree with the openness and transparency. The challenge becomes making sure that we know how to do that effectively in a way that we can report it, record it, and then on number 4 was the one I skipped, having to do with professionals. Conceptually, I agree with you. The challenge is, how do I work with our private partners to ensure that we establish a standard to make sure that takes place? And though I agree with you conceptually, our challenge becomes, because they are private companies, of dictating something along those lines in a mandatory way versus a voluntary way.
Thank you, Secretary. I am out of time. Let's talk further. I yield back.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Cartwright. Okay, so where do I begin? First, I want to acknowledge an oversight because we were not informed that Lieutenant General Gwen Bingham is also retiring after 32 years. And this is her last time testifying before the subcommittee. So thank you as well for your service and for your girl power. I'd like to ask unanimous consent to enter this article from BuzzFeed, whose headline includes, "The U.S. military will spend up to $1 billion to build 57 miles of Trump's border wall." Acting Secretary of Defense Patrick Shanahan announced the plan Monday night. So without objection, show that done. And Mr. Secretary, I entered that article into the record because last night, apparently Acting Secretary Shanahan announced that up to $1 billion was going to suddenly be spent in what appears to be a very expedited manner. That is the opposite of the way the administration even vaguely described the way this process would work in terms of transferring funds under the emergency declaration that the president made. Initially, you told us that, and first briefing staff on February 22nd, the OSD briefed staff on February 22nd about the 3 phases of this process for deciding how projects would be chosen. Then we had a MILCON hearing on the border wall in which you reiterated and referenced that phase. And then we also had printed material that indicated that there would be an assessment phase, an implementation phase, and a construction phase. Phases, by definition, are sequential. So it's baffling to me how it is that we have suddenly pushed the fast forward button, abandoned the phases, and just decided to move full steam ahead. So can you explain to me how again, I understand that you didn't answer the question specifically when you were asked about the process, the criteria, or the guidance provided in coming up with the list and in deciding how to proceed. But can you explain to me how it is that suddenly last night there was notification that the Secretary of Defense was going to be proceeding with spending $1 billion on projects that would be transferred for the purposes of this wall?
Madam Chairwoman, when I was here previously, as you described, I articulated a process of how that funding would be used, appropriated dollars, dollars that were sent back into the Treasury. The third step of that would be utilizing 10 U.S.C. 284. And what you saw last evening was not utilization of dollars that came from a MILCON process, I'll talk about that in a minute, but rather from utilization of those dollars and a reprogramming effort within the department to move $1 billion into a counter-drug authority under 10 U.S.C. 284. With regard specifically to the interest of this committee, as it has to do with military construction, the process that I described to you continues. That is, the acting secretary had sent a letter to the Department of Homeland Security requesting information about specific utilizations, what they would suggest, what they would like to see the department do. That letter has come from the Department of Homeland Security back in response to the acting secretary. That's in the process of being independently given to the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff for his assessment, as well as to the comptroller what those potential sources of funding might be, if in fact any of those projects would in fact be appropriate to be able to utilize 2808 authorities as we move forward. So where we are today with regards to that, the 284 authority was used by the acting secretary. $1 billion of $2.5 billion has been utilized.
I'm going to ask you to
yes, ma'am.
Pause because you're going to run the clock out on me. The actions that the executive branch has been undertaking are unprecedented and have not been transparent at all. In the department's own memo, you state, no military construction projects that have already been awarded and no projects with FY 2019 award dates will be impacted. So why were there projects on the list of the universal pool of projects that could potentially be eliminated for the border wall? Why were there projects on that list from FY 19 that now are not, you're saying are not there?
Madam Chairwoman, when we presented the list, what we wanted to do at that point in time is provide and be fully transparent of everything that had not been yet awarded to make sure that that was clear. As part of that process, what we further defined, there were, for example, barracks and housing projects on there as well. Those, as we alluded to before, will not be touched, nor will any projects that will award in 2019.
Well, that's not quite true. I have a list here of barracks projects that are on the border wall list, even though on February 27th, you said that, for the record, that barracks would not be part of the consideration. So why are there barracks on the list?
Because what we provided to the Congress was a list of everything in total that had not been awarded. And there were projects, even though they won't be touched.
You specifically said that barracks would not be part of the consideration, and barracks are on the list. That is not accurate.
The list that you have, Congresswoman, is a list of all of the projects, irrespective of whether they could be utilized, to be fully transparent on what was had not been awarded in fiscal year 19.
Again, that's not fully transparent. It's intentionally muddy, because if you put the universe of projects that are unobligated, which we obviously know, we know what projects we have that are unobligated. That's not something that we need to be informed about, since they're projects that we appropriated. If you put a universe, the entire universe of unobligated projects on the list, tell us that you are not going to use projects like barracks as eligible for transfer. Have a list of projects that are barracks. That's muddy, not transparent. It's the opposite of transparent. And I'm going to...
I believe we responded to the specific question we were asked, though, was not with regard specifically to the border wall, but what was unawarded, and we wanted to make sure we provided.
Asked what projects specifically are going to be canceled, and you used the term delay, which is also not accurate, what projects are going to be canceled that Congress has appropriated that you intend to use that funding for the wall? You have not produced a list that answers that question. You've given
Because
us a
at this
universe
point
of
in time-
projects that we already know exist.
Madam Chairwoman, at this point in time, that list does not exist because there's no requirement as to where we are in the process today. We have not determined that
But
any...
we have a requirement. Congress needs to know where you're spending funds, which we argue are being spent proposed to be spent illegally under an emergency declaration that is inappropriate and harmful and damaging to your military readiness.
Respectfully, at this point, ma'am, there is no requirement because there is nothing that's been approved for utilization under 2808 authorities. So there is no list that we would touch because we aren't that far in the process yet.
Okay, I'll come back to my questions in the second round. Mr. Case? I'm sorry, Mr. Rutherford.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Now I'm a little confused. The $1 billion that was reprogrammed from the drug money, that was used under 2808, correct?
No, sir, it was used 10 U.S.C. 284 was the authority by which that was reprogrammed for counter drug.
Oh, okay.
That was not MILCON funding.
Okay. So the 2808 authority is going to be used for those MILCON projects, is that have not been awarded in the ones that have a 2019 award are not will not be on the list, correct?
Those that we intend to have awarded in fiscal year 2019 will not be considered for
Correct.
utilization in support of 2808.
Okay, and no, no housing projects will be considered for award under 2808.
That is correct, nor any barracks or dormitories.
Okay. Okay, and so the list that the chairwoman has, is that the list of the total 21 billion in MILCON projects for that year?
Congressman, I believe the list that the chairwoman has is a list that was provided by the Department of Defense that at the time that list was put together were all unawarded MILCON projects, irrespective of what fiscal year they came from, so that list could be provided in total.
Okay. And do you have accounts that have, appropriated but unobligated, that you go back and sweep those accounts?
I would defer to the Force Services, but the short answer is yes, sir.
Okay. And that's not what that list is it?
No, Congressman.
Okay. Okay, and if I could ask one more question. The Vice Admiral Smith, looking at the highlighted shortage of dry docks for surface ships and the stated need to improve the infrastructure of both the public and our private yards, can you walk us through how this budget reflects these findings and how is the Navy planning on addressing this in future years out? We've got to find some dry dock space.
Yes, sir. So with respect to the shipyards, this year for fiscal year 20, we're proposing a little over $500 million to put towards the shipyard infrastructure optimization plan. From a strategic perspective, you've seen the report that was delivered last year. It's $21 billion over 20 years. Right now, we're into phase 2 of that plan, where we're doing modeling and simulation across the shipyard, starting with the Pearl Harbor Naval Shipyard, and determining what is the optimum flow path to make sure we apply the right military construction projects and also restoration and modernization funds. That phase 2 should be complete by the end of second quarter of fiscal year 20, which will then allow us to map in that phasing of that $21 billion that we need to apply to get those shipyards to where they need to be.
Okay. Thank you very much. And with that, Madam Chair, I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Rutherford. Mr. Case?
Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to try to get this clear in my own mind. I'm looking at your list. Your list identifies all MILCON projects appropriated. You also say that you don't intend to allocate any from that list that are awarded in FY 2019. So we don't have too much longer in FY 2019. Your list also identifies potential award dates, right? That's what I'm looking at. So I can pick a number of these, but I think the list that I have says potential award dates, but it's not actual award dates. So would it be fair to assume then that the most likely targets here are MILCON appropriated on that list for which you have an award date that is later than FY19? I mean, that's where you're going with this, right? Really?
Yes, Congressman. And again, the list that I believe was presented to the Congress was titled Total DoD MILCON Unawarded Projects, and it listed by component, state, location, projected award date, and projected title. To your point, those that would be awarded, projected to be awarded prior to 30 September 2019, we would not consider for us as a source under 2808 if we were to have to utilize 2808 authorities.
Yeah, okay. I think we're talking about the same list. The only thing that I would say to you is that the communication said actually awarded in FY 2019, whereas your list has projected to be awarded. There was a Q&A attached to that. So for me, some of the confusion is, okay, what is actually going on here? If it's projected to be awarded, it's on your list, then I don't have to worry about it at this point. But if it's projected to be awarded, but is not actually awarded until next year, then that's still a subject of concern to me.
Congressman, as you're aware, in some cases, we will project something may occur that will impact that. So I can't guarantee that if we project it, that it will execute that way, because there are factors beyond the control of our military services in terms of putting that together.
Yeah, I mean, I think the only comment I would make is that what you're setting off is a rush to award here out there in the field, and that might not be the best thing to do in the big picture. You're incentivizing people to do a very fast award here and to accelerate the bid process, really.
Understand your concern, Congressman. That was not our intent, but I also could understand that perception.
Okay. Switching gears. I just was able to spend a very productive couple of days in Okinawa. Thank you to the Marines for hosting me there. General Smith and his team there were outstanding. I want to say that on the record. Great team, great effort. Sorry I didn't get to Kadena for the Air Force, but maybe the next time. So that begs the question, the National Defense Strategy obviously has a rebalancing underway in the Indo-Pacific, which has us in agreement with the government of Japan, basically reducing and relocating our force, primarily Marines, on Okinawa, and taking them to Guam, and some of that to Hawaii, some of that back to the mainland United States. Where does do you feel that your MILCON strategy this fiscal year is following that general plan? And I've taken a look at it. I see the Guam expenditures, not significant, by the way, in Guam yet. I'm not sure why that is, unless it's just phasing. You're definitely taking care of what the Marines and the Pacific say is the top priority for their command, MAR-4PAC, which is the BEQ at K-Bay. That's in your budget. I don't really see any MILCON in there for Okinawa proper. So can you just, I guess I'm looking for assurance, because I think this is a good plan, and I think we got to stay on it, and I would accelerate it if I could. There's a lot of problems with, letting this drag on for another 12 years. So do you have what you need to get rebalanced in the Pacific?
Yeah, Congressman, thank you for the question, and thank you for going out there. There's no easy way to get to Okinawa in a quick time. I know it really can take a toll on anybody going out there. And the response, both by your office and from General Smith out there, they really appreciated your trip out there. And I would say, as you got briefed out there, it's such a dependency and linked strategy from what's happening in Okinawa, what's happening on Guam, as the Japanese make progress in the FRF and the eventually closure of Fatima is dependent on that. We understand we just have to sustain that till that happens, and the government of Japan's been a willing partner. So I think we're on track. As you know, there's 2 MILCOM projects in Guam this year, and as you mentioned, Mackey Hall is finally going to get fixed at K Bay, which is actually 3 buildings will be replaced, and that's been a top priority of the commandant to fix K Bay because they've been definitely behind the power curve. So, in your question, I think we're on track. We still we know what the plan is, and we're committed to move off of Okinawa as the current plan lies.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Case. Ms. Roby? Oh, you're good? Okay. All right. Ms. Pingree?
Thank you. Okay, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about climate change and military installations. And my understanding is, Secretary McMahon, that you had a role, or your office had a role in drafting the report called Report on Effects of a Changing Climate to the Department of Defense. I guess that's correct, right?
Yes, ma'am, and we did have a role in putting that together.
Great. So, according to the law, the report is required to include a list of the 10 military bases per military service that are most vulnerable to climate change, but it did not do that. It was required to discuss a mitigation plan to address the vulnerabilities, but it doesn't do that either. It provides no specifics on what is required to ensure operational viability and mission resiliency. It omits the Marine Corps, not sure why, and it omits overseas bases. So I'm wondering if you'd be willing to commit to going back, redrafting, and resubmitting to Congress the report with the required and necessary information to help us, to help you, to do your job to protect military installations in the future.
Congresswoman, first, what I would tell you is that installation resilience is tremendously important. Climate has a role, weather has a role, but as does cyber, as does water, as does energy. And I believe we need to take a holistic look to ensure that our installations, both today and in the future, are resilient to all the threats that they face. With regards to the specifics on the climate request, it identified 5 categories, as you know, that we were asked to comment on. There was no categorization of what installations might occur. There was a decision made that what we ought to do is focus on those installations that were most important. The 79 that we identified were identified by the Department of Defense as mission assurance installations, which we believe got to the heart of what the question was. Of those 79, and I would be happy to come back in closed session and share with you what the criteria were that drove that. But what we looked at were those 79 that have been historically identified by the department as our most critical installations of being able to provide that information. When that report was first provided to the Congress, we had provided an assessment of those, a second attempt, prioritized by service those 79. What, quite frankly, I wanted to stay away from, and Congressman Case will not appreciate this alluding to this, but for example, Bellows Air Force Station in Hawaii is a beautiful place. It's threatened by a rising water level, but it becomes irrelevant in the operational requirements of the Air Force and the Department of Defense because it's predominantly a recreational facility. What we wanted to present were those installations that we knew were important.
Okay, the best I can do is say thank you for that answer. I'll go back and look at it through that lens, but I may still have concerns, and I would say it's still vitally important that, and I agree with you in your first statement that all of those things are critical factors, but just look, cybersecurity and everything else that you said, but just looking through the lens of climate change, I do think it's critical that we know how each base is prepared, how it's anticipating what the future problems will be. And I also think it gives us some insights into where, where our climate change challenges are the greatest, because obviously military bases are our financial burden. They're not, private sector problems.
Congressman, as you know, if with the 5 criteria that were identified in the NDAA, neither Tyndall nor Lejeune would have been alluded to in that. And so what I would offer is I believe that irrespective of the cause of where we are today, we know that there are factors we ought to be considering, and we ought to be able to articulate to you all the things that we're doing to prepare for that. And I'd be happy to come back and share with you the litany of things that we're doing to ensure that we are.
Great. Well, I will follow up on that, whether it's with the full committee or I access that information from you. So thank
Yes,
you
ma'am.
for that.
Thank you, Ms. Pingree. Mr. McMahon, to follow up, and Mr. Rutherford doesn't have any additional questions, so just correct? Okay. To follow up on my previous line of questioning, I'd like you to provide for the committee, for the record, with an updated list of projects that, 1, won't be awarded by September 30th, 2019, 2, does not include barracks, dorms, or family housing, 3, the list should only include projects with award dates after September 30th, 2019, so that we understand more clearly what we're dealing with in terms of the real potential universe of projects, not every single possibility, including the things that you don't intend to include. Okay?
Madam Chairwoman, I understand your request. And
you will
I take
comply
that for record.
And you will comply with it for the record. Thank you very much. I'd also like to enter into the record without objection the entire universe of unobligated but appropriated projects that do not include any of the exceptions that have been indicated verbally or otherwise by the department. Without objection, show that done. Secretary McMahon, will you be submitting 1391s with each proposed wall project?
I don't know the answer to that question, ma'am. I'll take that for record.
Okay. Will the wall projects be managed in compliance with military construction law in Title 10?
Yes, ma'am.
Will you commit to ensuring that proposed wall projects are NEPA compliant?
Congresswoman, as you know, that in some cases, because of the national emergency, there is a waiver for NEPA that can be followed by the Department of Homeland Security, so I cannot commit to that.
So there is, and I understand, a process by which you can skip NEPA under 2808 because there's a provision notwithstanding any other provision of law, but not under other MILCON authorities, correct?
Under the national emergency, that is correct. Yes, ma'am, you can skip
There are
that.
other MILCON authorities that you do have to require you to comply with NEPA.
That is correct.
Okay. Will the department notify this subcommittee and members specifically when a project in their district is canceled due to the border wall?
Madam Chairwoman, no projects will be canceled because of support of the wall. They will be deferred.
They are not going to be deferred. They're going to be canceled. We've already appropriated the funding, as I said, and we are not backfilling the funding in this bill. So as a result, they will be canceled because of the president's decision to take the money from funds already appropriated by Congress. So my question is, whatever term you choose to apply to it, will you be notifying the subcommittee and the members in whose districts a project is being canceled that it's being canceled to support the border wall?
The Department of Defense has a responsibility that if a project is impacted, that there'll be notification done to the Congress.
But my question is specific to this subcommittee and to the individual members in whose districts these projects exist.
I'm not sure what the specific notification process will be. I'll take that for record if I could, please.
Okay. Secretary McMahon, during our February 27th border wall hearing, it was stated for the record, as I said, that barracks would not be part of the consideration. are or are you not going to be utilizing barracks projects and divert that funding for the border wall?
Madam Chairwoman, once again, I'll state that we are not going to be utilizing barracks or dormitories for funding for the border wall.
Last year, I visited Puerto Rico, and one of the first things I noticed was that there are numerous facilities that were built 20-plus years ago, and Hurricane Maria did significant damage to those facilities on the island. In the pool of projects that was shared, the overall universe, there are 14 projects in Puerto Rico, and 10 fall under the criteria for being canceled for the border wall. Are there any discussions to not touch those projects for the border wall?
Madam Chairwoman, I would have to defer to the specific services for that discussion.
Okay, well, they're here, so if they could answer, I'd appreciate it.
Applying the criteria that Secretary McMahon has outlined, I do not believe the Navy has any that would be eligible for that. And that's, again, using the criteria that's been defined here, understanding there's...
We really haven't had criteria, Admiral, that have been well-defined.
Yes,
so
ma'am.
I don't know what the criteria are that you're referring to.
I am articulating my comments based upon what Secretary McMahon has articulated here, understanding that that is not necessarily clear to the committee, ma'am.
Mr. Secretary, my colleagues earlier asked you what that criteria was, and you were not specific, as I understand it, that you did not outline a process or guidance or criteria that would be used. So what criteria is the Admiral referring to?
Madam Chairwoman, as I outlined in February and will outline again, no military construction projects that already have been awarded and no military construction projects with fiscal year 2019 award dates will be impacted. No military housing barracks or dormitory projects will be impacted. And the pool of potential military construction projects from which funding could be reallocated to support the construction of border barrier are solely projects with award dates after September 30th, 2019.
Okay, well, there are 10 that, as far as I understand it, fall under that criteria. So are you saying that those projects are not going to be canceled? Because the information that I have is that there are 10 projects that fall within the criteria that you have outlined. Yes.
Can I ask a clarification?
Sure, yeah, I'd be happy to yield to the gentleman.
Thank you. You say that it's the programs that have been awarded by September of 19. Now, I see for Puerto Rico, for example, there are barracks and other facilities for 2020, 2021. Are those living when you say no housing will be used, are you talking about housing with a 2019 date, or are you talking about 2021, 2020?
Can you give that to me so I can?
There will be no housing.
We will not touch housing, period, dot, end of conversation.
Regardless of year that it's...
That is correct.
Okay, that's what I wanted to know. Thank you.
So continuing, here is this list in yellow are projects in Puerto Rico that were impacted by Hurricane Maria that will not be awarded by September 30th of 2019. There's 10 of them, and they are all projects that, under the criteria you've listed, would be eligible to be canceled in favor of spending that money on the border wall. So that is my question. Is that accurate, or are there discussions to leave projects that have been impacted by Hurricane Maria in Puerto Rico alone?
Madam Chairwoman, as I indicated, I would have to go to each of the specific services to ask them for their input on those.
And as I said, they're here, so I can start going through them individually. We have Army National Guard project in Arroyo. We have Camp Santiago, Company Headquarters Building, Engineering Housing Maintenance Shops, National Guard Readiness Center, Power Substation Switching Station Building, Vehicle Maintenance Shop, Aircraft Maintenance Hangar. Many of these I have seen with my own eyes. In St. Croix and St. Thomas, we have facilities. Anyone that
Ma'am,
is able
for
to
the Air
answer.
Force, I'm happy to sit with your staff and maybe compare lists. As I look at mine, I have about 150 projects totaling about $3.5 billion in MILCON that has been appropriated by you all that is not yet obligated, is not yet awarded. But when I
Right.
apply the three criteria that Secretary McMahon mentioned, that list gets cut to 62 projects that are about $1.5 billion. But I don't show anything in Puerto Rico on my list. So I'll be happy to sit with you all and make sure that I don't have a
Okay,
misread
well,
somewhere.
what we could, applying the criteria that has been, you've been indicating that you're using, we do have projects on the list. So we need to make sure we get some clarity on that, and we'd appreciate that, so thank you.
Madam Chairwoman,
Yes,
the Army has 13 military construction projects that were funded from my FY18 hurricane supplemental. 5 of those were transferred to the Corps of Engineers. One of those is an enlisted barracks, and the other 2 are DFAC company headquarters and 2 vehicle maintenance facilities. We're looking at an award in the summer of 2021 on those projects.
which would leave them still eligible to be taken, whose funding could be taken to fund the border wall. Thank you. As I said, we have really serious, dire situations that many of these facilities are in, and the border wall is being prioritized over military readiness and helping Puerto Rico recover. Okay. Just a couple more quick questions on Tyndall, and then I'm finished, and that weren't asked earlier. What amount of MILCON is executable related to Tyndall in this current fiscal year?
Our requirement for the Air Force at Tyndall and MILCON is $150 million for planning and design.
Right, right. And that's all that's executable?
We
then-
would not award any MILCON projects in fiscal year 19 at Tyndall. We're on the front end of design.
Right, okay. And then how about in 20?
I don't have a number for you, but I would expect that we will want to start awarding MILCON projects in fiscal year 20. What we're doing now is we're cash flowing from our normal planning and design accounts to get some of that MILCON design underway, so we should be ready in 20 for some of those projects. I can come and sit with your staff and give you more detail on that.
Again, the concern I have is the backfill issue, because you're robbing Peter to pay Paul at the moment, and at some point, when you continue to do that, you're not going to be spending, I mean, you're at the point now where you're not spending that money on what we originally intended, and you still have those needs, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And
That's
how
correct.
will we address those needs if you spend them on the Tyndall?
The challenge will
refurbishment.
compound itself without the planning and design in fiscal year 19, because we get into next year where our requirement for those design dollars are going to increase quickly, and then we'll be in a position of do we pay for the planning and design at Tyndall, or do we pay for the planning and design for the projects that I expect we'll bring to you this year and next year for MILCON?
So doesn't that beg the question, Admiral, don't you think, that, General, excuse me, don't you think that we need a supplemental for an emergency supplemental so that we can, because the very definition of what you're describing, of the situation you're describing, cries out for an emergency supplemental?
Ma'am, I need $150 million in planning and design in fiscal year 19, and I think the answer to that question is yes.
Okay, that's what I thought. Okay, and that's all the questions I have. If there's nothing, then let me just turn back to my script here. Got it. Okay. So that concludes this afternoon's hearing. I want to remind members that our next hearing is March 27th at 1 p.m. in 2359 Rayburn on the Veterans Affairs Department budget for fiscal year 20. The Secretary of the VA will be joining us. And again, thank you to each of you for your service. Good luck in your retirement to the 3 of you that are retiring. And Mr. Secretary, thank you for joining us as well. The subcommittee stands in recess, subject to the call of the chair.